afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Raising Excellence, one of the most valuable hours of your day. Today's show, are you walking around wounded? Let's meet each of our fabulous hosts today. Our first up is Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
Willow, our trauma consultant, who's also going to be leading us through this show.
Hi, everyone.
And Dennis, our freedom facilitator.
Hi there. Thank you for being with us tonight.
If you're viewing live and have a question, and by the way, I know we started a little late today. We had a few technical difficulties, but we're gonna give you a full show. This is gonna be great. I guarantee it. So if you're viewing live and you do have questions, please feel free to throw them out there. We will try and answer them as we go. With all that said, let me get back to Willow, and Willow, take it from here.
All right, so hi, I'm Willow, as we already went over a few minutes ago. I am a trauma consultant, a life coach, and for today's journey, your host. The concept that we are going to be talking about today is basically that we are all familiar with the definition and experience of being physically wounded. And I think few people are aware of emotional and spiritual wounds, which are commonly sustained after surviving a traumatic experience. Today, I really just want to shed a little bit of light on the subject of trauma. So if Agnieszka could put the first slide up on the screen. The first part of my discussion is answering the question of what is trauma. And actually, I should pull up my slide. So I found two definitions for trauma, and they were A, serious, and I actually added this in my own notes, perceived or actual injury to the body, as from physical violence. So this includes like being physically hit, or like a stab wound would be a physical trauma to the body, and that's what that definition is referring to. The other one is the one we'll mostly revolve around this evening, is a severe emotional or mental distress caused by an unbearable feeling or experience. So that is the literal definition of trauma, and just kind of wanted to discuss that with everyone else. I'm not exactly sure what question to ask.
Well,
What would you
does that mean that the situation we're facing right now is kind of like traumatizing the world?
It could be.
By your definition, that would, if not everybody is, but I could imagine that a lot of people are, under severe, not only emotional stress right now because of, being forced to stay at home and not to be able to work and to be around their families too often.
Absolutely.
But it seems that could actually fulfill that definition of being traumatized.
I think there's a lot of people experiencing it's actually, the stage would be re-traumatizing right now, because they are faced with the unbearable feelings from the past, and they're just kind of reliving. That's why this whole isolation thing is actually, it's not very good for any of our mental health, to be honest. But I was gonna ask, what in your life have you ever been able to identify as trauma? I know a lot of us have seen trauma, maybe not personally, but even being a witness to trauma and like other people's trauma are examples.
I have an interesting story that points at trauma being, more broad than people normally think. I was in a self-discovery course, one of those courses where you deeply look at your own life and share deeply and really, see the... Sorry. And really look at yourself in a very deep level. And one of the participants was telling a story about how she lost her cat there was a house fire and her cat was in the house, and she managed to get her kid out, but the cat was still in the house, and she was panicking about the cat's well-being, right? And suddenly I started crying, and I didn't know why. And then after the whole talk was over, sharing thing was over, the teacher comes up to me. He's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, I can't stop crying. I'm like, because the cat. And he's like, "What?" I said, "Because the cat ran away." And her cat didn't run away. It was my cat that ran away. And so suddenly in this course, I had this huge influx of emotion from my own experience as a child that I didn't even think was significant at all. So that was interesting.
It's amazing how witnessing, or not even witnessing, but hearing vicariously about a traumatic, something you clearly identify in your mind, that is traumatic, no doubt about it. And all of a sudden, all of your prior associations with trauma come to the surface.
So that means that if for example, through media or through certain movies, if you're exposed to situations, then you can be also re-traumatized because it reminds you of your own past that, you know, you might not even consciously remember, but then those movie scenes or so, they actually traumatize you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I remember as a kid, there was a show on. I think it was one of Rod Serling's shows, but it was like the painting comes to life, and it's like it's like part of it's like the story representation of the story, but it's like a scary story. And I wasn't supposed to be up that late, but I was like hiding behind one of the chairs to try and watch this scary show, and it scared the hell out of me. I can remember it to this day. That like just being afraid from something that was on the TV show. So I mean, I think there's a great deal of trauma to go around in different ways and shapes and forms. That essentially it is one in which you kind of devolve back into like that fight or flight situation, right?
And is that also, is it something that can be, you know, varied in depending on you know, each and everyone? Like, is there something that might traumatize me but not somebody else? Or is it even like talking about physical trauma, because there's more, you know, like I noticed several times, for example, that for me something, you know, would not, you know, it might hurt, but I don't feel traumatized by it. But for somebody else who, you know, it might be, you know, like half of the pain that I seemingly experience, like would mean like a huge thing. So I wonder if that's something that occurs as well, you know, that certain things might traumatize one somebody and the other, and another one, you know, is barely even touched by it. Or is that just because people would have developed like a certain way of you know, like how you say, like a tough skin or so, or they would not show they are traumatized, but they don't show it so well? How would you see that?
I like to refer back to the last part of the second definition, where it's talking about all the distress caused by an unbearable feeling or experience. Excuse me, I had to burp. So this kind of made me think, like, what have you been, I don't want to say trained, or like, what have you learned in the past that you can bear? That's going to vary from person to person. Sometimes people have really emotionally supportive parents, but they don't have physically supportive parents or medically supportive, like there's other things lacking in their environment. So there are things that they have not been taught to bear, yet they can probably, they probably couldn't bear having all their friends disassociate with them and be like, no, we don't want to be friends with you, and now you're going to be the lonely kid in the school. He probably couldn't bear that near as much as he could going, 3-4 days without food. But it doesn't mean, I don't think that it's different levels of trauma, but it's still trauma. And that's kind of what this whole first part of the question is. Trauma doesn't have to be obvious. It doesn't have to be, I heard of a friend's cat who died in a fire. That's obviously traumatic. It can be, it was traumatic. It was emotionally traumatic for me that my cat ran away. And like, it can vary from person to person, I think. I know, actually.
I think once I remembered the episode, I realized that in my mind, I was thinking of it as him having betrayed me and abandoned me. And so it was like an abandonment issue, which also correlates with other issues. You know what I mean?
Yes. Usually most of our trauma, it's like an onion. It makes you cry, and there's a lot of layers. So I think we should move on to the second slide, which is just a list of examples of trauma. And I wrote down a couple of them because there was quite a few.
Oops, there we go.
I was hoping it would show up on my screen quick enough that I could just read off of it and be a little lazy.
Well, I flashed the viewers a second of last week's fallacy, so, and then went back to the
Nice.
slide. I'm sure it was kind of confusing, but hey.
That's okay.
Examples of trauma is what I got on the screen.
So I trimmed this down. There was actually more, but they required more explanation. The big ones that everyone kind of knows are like sexual abuse and assault, physical abuse and assault, which I always count underneath physical. It's just a different type of physical abuse. Emotional abuse, psychological maltreatment, neglect, serious accident or illness and medical procedures, being witness to domestic violence, and there was quite a few that were like witness to school violence, witness to community violence, witness to all these other different types of violence. To be honest, if you are a witness to violence or a victim of violence, then you have probably you have experienced trauma. Other ones were natural and man-made disasters, war and terrorism and political violence, traumatic grief and separation, and system-induced trauma. And I was really glad that I found system-induced trauma because that was something that people don't necessarily, they don't associate, oh, I went to school for 12 years and I turned out fine. And I'm like, there's a lot of trauma that goes on in school that people just don't, they don't associate it with trauma. They think it's normal. It's the same argument that people will use for corporal punishment with their children and say, well, I was hit as a kid or I got spanked as a kid and I turned out fine. It's the same. I think we're good on that slide. I got every.
There's David Hawkins has the power versus force and that map of consciousness, and it suggests that shame is like the lowest form of consciousness. I feel like shame is certainly something when people are shamed, that can be severely traumatizing, especially for younger
So
children and so forth.
yes, actually, I think it was either Pete Walker or it was, I have to remember, I can't remember. There's a gentleman who does IFS, and he was very closely tied with Richard Schwartz. But I cannot, I'm blanking on his name right now.
What is IFS?
IFS is Internal Family System Model, and it's a integrative model of how to do psychoanalysis. Yeah, psychoanalysis.
Hey, by the way, Deirdre wasn't able to be here today with us. She had some stuff to take care of, but she is on Periscope watching, and she wanted me to tell you that you're rocking it. So,
Thank you. I like a little encouragement from the audience. It's always nice to know.
nice.
When the spotlight's on
Hello,
you, you
Deirdre.
really start to wonder.
I did.
But back to what I was saying. I'll have to check and see who exactly said it, but they were talking about how shame is not an emotion that children under a certain maturity level are able to handle. It is literally an unbearable experience because shame in the mind means there is something inherently wrong. There's something wrong with me. Not, I did something wrong. I made a mistake. There is something wrong with me. I need to change. Like, I have to change who I am. And that's not something that is applicable to children under a certain age or maturity level. There's nothing wrong with them. If they're throwing a tantrum because they're very upset right now, they're having a hard time dealing with it. They're not just bad kids. And that's actually what's the word? A common thing that has happened in parenting, where the parents are just like, you're behaving badly to embarrass me. You're behaving badly because you hate me, or because you're just like your other parent who I don't like. And yeah, it can be incredibly traumatizing because it's not. Agnieszka, you had told me this story about having a friend who was traumatized by something that like seemed completely, wasn't it about a computer or something?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm thinking of what you're thinking of.
Maybe not. I if I can remember
I think
the
it
rough
might have
details of the
been
story.
about my
Well, I
mother
can.
being reluctant to touch a computer, and after 20 minutes, it gives her the heebie-jeebies.
No, it was about a maybe it was a partner who wasn't given a computer, and then it was bought for like someone else in his family.
Yes, yeah, that
And
happened. Yes, yeah. So he was, I think, 10, and he really wanted a computer, but he got something like a cassette player or whatever, and then his cousin for his first communion ended up getting the computer that he wanted from his own parents, and that was a traumatic event
Mm,
for him
mm.
because
well,
he
and the
got this
crazy
shitty little thing, right? And for the same event, his cousin gets something way fancier.
and what I found fascinating about that story is later you had told me that I think he had bought the exact same computer for himself,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
did
as an
nothing.
adult.
It didn't do anything.
Yeah.
He wasn't happy. And I'm like, yeah, that's because when you're trying to, fill a wound in your body with,
Well, I don't know. Maybe he got some satisfaction from purchasing that computer because it was like obsolete and an antique by the time he actually ended up buying it and having it, but it was still the same computer from the cousin story, right? So maybe it did give him some kind of a satisfaction.
hopefully, that would be the goal, is that you learn self-agency and you know how to like uh get over, not get over, but like you learn how to approach these things as a obstacle that you can get past
Yeah.
versus something that is always going to be in your way.
I brought up shame because I was actually I went to school, Catholic school, and man, I'm telling you, they use shame a lot, and guilt, of course. And those two alone, I mean, I can think of many different examples where they, you know, really, you know, terrorized the children, because they made an example out of somebody and just, ridiculed them. And I just, to me, that was always something that I really hated, you know, in regard to going to Catholic school, was that kind of, shaming. And it is one of those things where, like, you're asking a legitimate question about, maybe in some cases this is about like the way that Catholics believe versus other people and so forth. And oh my God, don't ask that. And
But
for
how are you
somebody
supposed
that's,
to
6 or 7 years old, you know what are you going to do? But I can certainly see how a lot of people, and I'm sure it's the same with with schooling in general, because there is a lot of things that are, obviously wrong with the way things are being done. And if someone brings that up, you know
It, it
they
it's really done to keep you in line, isn't it? Like to train you to conform to the group think and to be part of the group, and everybody falls into line with what's expected of them because everybody's afraid of getting shamed and of having a different opinion.
yeah.
When you were talking about shame, one of my favorite stories, and of course I got it from Facebook. I spend way too much time on Facebook. But it was a village that when you do something wrong and you need to be called out for it, what they do is they take you into the middle of the village and everyone stands around you and they all yell the things that they know are good about you. The things that,
That's-
like, you helped me paint my fence when I had a broken leg. You were just so nice. But they overwhelm this person with so many good things that they've done that they themselves feel shame. And it's not because someone else is saying you need to feel shame, but they feel shame in a way that they know that they need to change, and it's their decision, and it's not forced upon them. I think that was like one of my favorite stories.
That's called the Ubuntu. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a real healthy, I think that's a healthy tradition,
Don't they do
to
that in
say the
Hawaii
least.
too? Where they surround them and talk about all their good deeds and stuff?
I think it should be a thing we do everywhere.
Well, I mean, we can start one if you want. We'll just do it virtually.
Yeah, we can do
True.
that in Raising Excellence. Every time somebody messes something up, we'll get them on Zoom and tell them all these good things.
Hey, it'd be fun to see the outcome, to be honest. The shame
Yeah, I
is
think
shame is one of the hardest things to get over, even in counseling sessions. It's like you could talk about all the things that hurt you, that other people have hurt you, or you've hurt yourself. But one of the hardest things to do is admit that because you have been traumatized, because of the lessons that you've learned, that sometimes there's a possibility that you were the bad guy, that you did hurt someone, that you manipulated their feelings and it was not in a good way. And that sometimes you can be the toxic person and you have hurt people. There is so much shame around that. And this goes back to we'll touch on this in, I think, next episode, about one of the reflexes or coping mechanisms for these situations is fawning, which is complying. It's going along with whatever these people want because it makes your life a little bit easier. And the shame surrounding developing coping mechanisms to survive an abusive life, it's long lasting.
That sounds really exciting because, again, to my association I had first starting off with the current situation, does that mean then that the great majority of people are doing exactly that? Just, putting their head down and going along with things in order to avoid confronting, with a situation that is really unbearable to them?
Well, why do you think
Yeah,
people are on
definitely.
Netflix 24 hours a day?
Why do you think we have such a rampant addiction rate? I tell people I've stopped using the term meth addict, heroin addict, alcoholic. I just say addict because I'm an addict too. I actually just had this I had it kind of not thrown in my face, but it was like right there in my face where I was like, holy crap, I have a little bit of an issue because I just developed some friends that are really awesome friends and they don't drink. And it's so ingrained in my mind that if I go hang out with people, I go grab a bottle of wine so we can share and hang out. And even though I've been confronted with this numerous times, it still hasn't clicked in my brain. And I'm like, oh, okay, this might be an actual, like, maybe I'm anxious to go hang out with people. And that's my coping mechanism. That's my addiction, to my crutch to lean on. It used to be cigarettes. And I stopped smoking cigarettes, and my vape works really well, but it doesn't quite fulfill. Like, I was at the Red Pill Expo when I met Agnieszka, and I got around so many smart people and I started feeling really self-conscious. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what I can do? I know that I can go smoke a cigarette and I will feel a lot better. So I went and bummed cigarettes off a couple people, and then I went and bought a pack of cigarettes to kind of get me through. And I was like, I know that I'm using this as a crutch. I fully am aware of it, but at least I'm aware of it. And I can say, all right, I don't need this crutch anymore. Or this crutch is actually getting in my way.
I don't know. I think a bigger crutch is you thinking that you're less smart than anybody at that conference.
Oh, absolutely. But I met G. Edward Griffin, who my husband is a fan of. And I have not read any of his works. I did not know anything about pretty much anything that anyone was saying there. I was like, cool. That's brand new information, and I felt like I was drinking out of a fire hose. I got really self-conscious because I'm like, I don't look into this stuff. I don't research all this stuff that they're talking about. Like, am I really far behind? Am I just like a sheep that's following around some wolves over here? What's going on? And G. Edward Griffin's assistant, I think, leaned over and she goes, honey, it's okay. You're smart for wanting to hang out with smart people. And I was like, holy shit, you're right. I am smart for wanting to hang around smart people. That's completely true. So that helped me a lot, and I didn't smoke as many cigarettes, but it also allowed me to feel calm enough to be like, okay, I am feeling anxious because of this reason. I know how to put a band-aid on it for now, but I really do need to like fix that up a little bit later. Like, so it did help a lot.
Nice. So what about the gentlemen? I think they should have a say.
Yes.
On this whole trauma topic.
I've got a G. Edward Griffith story myself, but I don't think it applies.
It wasn't traumatizing?
Way to titillate it.
No, but it was kind of an interesting one because he was in it was in a hotel, one of the premier hotels in Washington D.C. And I see Edward, G. Edward Griffin, and nobody else seems to know who he is except for me, and it's like, oh, what do I do? Do I, I wanted to run over there and say hello, but I don't want to look too anxious.
Nice.
So what did you do?
It's always fun meeting people
I did go
online.
over there and say hello and got to talk with him for a bit. He was standing in line, so he wasn't really perturbed by it.
Good for you. Most people when they like meet someone online, it's like a little nerve-wracking because you're like, we've never actually met, but you almost feel intrusive because you're like, I have watched you before, but you have never seen me. I did that at the Red Pill Expo because we were walking up to the restaurant. Excuse me. And
still emotional about it?
A little bit. It was really embarrassing, actually. We walked up to the restaurant and I was looking for the Autonomy group. So I was looking for familiar faces. That's exactly what I was like. If I recognize your face, you're probably in Autonomy because who else would I know here? And I looked up and I was like, oh yeah, there's our people. I recognize those people. And we walked halfway up. We started waving to them. And it was YouTubers that we had watched on YouTube. And I saw familiar face and I was like, that's our people. And they just like waved at us like, oh, fans. Okay, cool. Like, oh, no. I'm going to go eat now and drink.
I was just thinking along the lines of, and maybe that's, for the next show or shows to talk about, but it's already like going into kind of preparing or like overcoming it or building strategies how to overcome or how to face trauma. Because I was remembering like several situations in my life that I would kind of like consciously subject myself to trauma, and even if it's just like on a physical level, but the fact that I knew it was coming down or it was an event or that seemed to make a difference. So it's not like a surprise thing that I didn't expect, but it's like, okay, I'm going to prepare for this even like for weeks or for months, and then I'm going to do this and I'm going to go there, and I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do, but they're going to try to traumatize me and they're going to try to make me give up and whatever. So I think, and then when it's there, oftentimes I would say, okay, like I've gone through worse, and give it, you better give it your best shot because I didn't come here for nothing. So it's like it kind of, I feel it helped me to go through it and to even sometimes see that I expected worse, by expecting like the worst, and then whatever comes along is like, oh, I could have thought about something even worse than what you're trying to do right now. But the fact that it's something planned and something that I was able to even mentally prepare for, I think that made a difference, because if it would have just happened like out of the blue, I think it would probably have hit home on a different level or more severe.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because yes, that will be the ultimate goal is to teach people how to deal with it. I was actually discussing this with someone the other day, or my husband was, about negative visualization and how it is a good tool. but only if you know how to use it correctly. If you're only negatively visualizing, you are reliving trauma. You're re-traumatizing yourself without imagining how to get out of the situation or make a change. I lost my train of thought with that.
But Kelly thinks you're rocking it too.
Yay. I'm really glad. I really appreciate all of the encouragement from the audience.
From the
It
Ottoman.
does.
You know,
And now I'm
Yes.
imagining them all sitting on an Ottoman.
something occurred to me in regard to the title, and when we were talking about this on the prep meeting, we were talking about what the title might be. The idea of people being walking wounded is something that a lot of people can see, and for someone like Agnieszka, who knows a lot about the physical features and what they are characterizing, and for people that can read nonverbal signals, a lot of people are broadcasting their trauma out to the world. They just don't know it. And this is something that I think could really bring people's awareness to the fact that a lot of people have trauma and the effects of trauma, and just don't really realize it. They're hiding it from themselves, but they're not hiding it from other people, and other people can recognize it, and so they make adjustments to them. But it is hindering them from their own success and their own you know
Yeah,
wherever they're trying to go. But I don't know, does anybody want to touch on that a little bit?
I do. So when people are like have like facial, not deformities, but like have like an expression like this, or like if you actually look at people's faces, especially some older people, you'll see like they have these kind of like almost like expressions that are etched into their face. Now, if you want to know what the feeling brought that upon, so what brought that upon is having that feeling over and over and over until your skin starts folding in that way, right? And so when you find that, you can make your face in the same, like the people that are like this, right? What brought that on? Grief, right? Because when you do that with your own mouth, you'll feel the feeling, or like a touch of the feeling that they're bringing, like they're painting on their face. So you can tell what has brought it upon. And like this, that's like a fuck you. Oops, I shouldn't have said that. Now we're gonna get back.
Oh, slip.
So
Accidents happen. We apologize. We apologize for our inhumanness, YouTube. Please forgive us.
For our humanness, I would say, right?
Yes.
should we put on the next slide?
You were saying, so like
Well-
you experience these different things from your own facial experiences, so you can kind of relate to what people are feeling as well.
I wanted to add in 2 more examples of that before we move on to the next slide.
Hang on. Before you say that, Kelly says Imbutu time.
Oh, we shouldn't have talked about that.
Okay, go on.
The first one was, I was really interested in like palm reading, because I love anything that's like esoteric or fantasy, like anything of that nature, mythology. And I was reading about your lifeline, which I believe is like this. It's supposed to be like from here, and it can go all the way across your palm, but it's usually in this general area. Now, it doesn't mean like how long you're gonna live. That's what the teachings say. Like, how long your line is doesn't mean that you're gonna live a long life. It means you're going to live an eventful life. And I found that interesting because while I was sitting in one of my jiu-jitsu classes, because I was too chicken to actually go into the actual class, I pulled out one of their jiu-jitsu magazines, and it was talking about how they're finding links between grip strength, of finger grip strength, so here, connected to much more eventful, like healthy life, people who have like healthy longer lives, and they are like way more active in doing things. And I found that to be a really interesting correlation. also another one was, so someone who is like blind, if they win a race, their body will go, yes, I won. They've never seen anyone do that. They've literally never seen anyone do that. So how did they know how did they know that that was the physical expression of that emotion? I think that, like these emotions, they definitely influence the way our body works and the functionality of it, for sure. Which actually is a perfect segue into the next slide.
Slide 3.
Lovely.
Oh, sorry. Like so. Voila. Slide 3. When your body detects a threat.
Sorry, bad time to take a drink.
That's a threat right there.
Ooh, yes, it is. My lungs feel very threatened.
That was your need for survival.
Something, I don't know what. And as soon as I took the sip, I was like, no, this is a mistake. And I inhaled it and I was like, this is going to be worse.
This is another mistake.
So the next part of this that I wanted to talk about is what happens when your body detects a threat. So I'll just go ahead and read this. The oldest parts of the brain have knowledge of physical escape plans in the oldest parts of the brain. I didn't edit that out very well.
Oh, oops. I missed it too.
That's okay. Basically, these old parts of the brain have specific plans already in place to ensure your survival, no matter which one it is. And what happens is when this old brain takes over, it partially shuts down the higher brains, which is your logical mind, your conscious mind, and it propels the body to either run, hide, fight, or freeze. The third process is when the fight, flight, freeze response is successful and danger is escaped, our internal equilibrium returns and gradually we regain our senses. So we come back to a normal. And this is your brain's response to trauma. It shuts off your logical thinking. You're like, nope, I can't think anymore, can't process information. I must deal with the issue at hand.
Yeah. And that concludes our slides for today.
That is all of the slides.
That just reminded me of instinctive physical behavior, because even like from a perspective of survival, under physical attack or in a self-defense situation, it's remarkable how even highly trained people, and I think an example would be the reaction of a professional boxer, Muhammad Ali, actually in a TV interview, where the host kind of lured him into a story that he was telling him, and Muhammad Ali, like, he was so into the story, and then out of nowhere the host, like, I'm not sure if it was if he did a noise or if he just screamed. Yeah, I think he just screamed at him out of nowhere, like without any apparent reason. And if you look at the slow motion of the reaction of Muhammad Ali, who's like, professional boxer and who has ingrained instinctive reactions to, physical assault, so to say, and he reacted like any child would react, like, the same physical, throwing the hands up and leaning back out. And it was super interesting because you would expect that, with that ingrained, physical capacity of punching or like shielding himself, it's like you would expect something like that. But that program, it was completely overwritten, although he had it so ingrained in his, in its reaction, so to say, to, that physical assault, like it was instantaneously overwritten, and it went right back to his instinctive reaction, which is, like, if a perceived threat is there physically, you throw up your hand and you lean back out, and which could be seen, with any child or with anybody, really, you're surprised, and that was really amazing. So I was wondering if that, if you could draw from an example like that, and also if there is a similar situation, on the emotional level as well, whereas, like a threat is coming in, and then you're completely overwhelmed. So you have that instinctive emotional reaction, or even psychological reaction as well, that will go back to basic survival mode, if you're not prepared for that kind of traumatic influence in the moment.
So I'm reminded of a picture that I saw of, I believe it was a young man in World War II, and he's sitting in the trenches with his gun, but he's not even holding it. He's got it wrapped like in his arms, and his arms are like this. His face is in absolute like. Have you ever seen it? You know, I'm sure people have seen like a baby just like lose it and just be like, you know, like terror on your face. His whole body is in fetal position and he has urinated himself. And it's talking about how this is a man unfit for war. But in reality, that was a human being reverting back to the only thing that he knew how to get comfort and survival, which was to cry for mom. Curl up, fetal position, be a baby, and cry for someone to help because that's the only thing his brain knew how to do. I think these mechanisms, like these coping mechanisms, they are triggered at different stages. So I think it's our first reaction to fight. So if someone strikes us, we strike back. We avoid danger. And when we are taught that avoiding danger gets you into more danger, you move to the next one, which we'll go into the next. That's more in the next show about like what happens when your threat response is thwarted, when you don't return to equilibrium. That's more into like the freezing and posturing and fawning, because your first two reactions are either get away from it, and if you can't get away from it, you fight it. And usually people switch back and forth. That's another topic I wanted to touch on.
So is that going to be, hang on, so is that going to be on Wednesday or Thursday where we cover that? The third option or the other option?
That is going to be Thursday.
Okay.
I keep jumping ahead of myself.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to let people know when we're covering that topic. Go on.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to come in real handy because I think a lot of the soldiers and a lot of the people that are suffering from PTSD, this is right up their alley.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we can address a lot of that and give people a lot more, a much better understanding of what this affliction is and why people suffer from it so greatly and how they might be able to resolve that.
You don't have to be a soldier to be suffering from PTSD, and it doesn't even have to be like nobody has to die, and you could still a sudden shock, a sudden fear that lasts and without resolution could possibly, create feelings of PTSD, even if it's short-lived and nobody actually got hurt in the end.
This can actually be brought on within the first 2 years of life. Sorry, I am burping just repeatedly. Every time I want to talk, it's like, nope, you're gonna burp on live.
Maybe it's your body's way of dealing with being on stage and being in charge of this show today, because
It probably is.
You had some fears and they're coming out. I thought Dennis had something to add a moment ago. Are you feeling heard?
I was thinking along the line that the really crucial thing is to be aware of that, because I feel most people probably they are in that state, and yet we're not aware that we are being traumatized, that we are being attacked, yet we are reacting to it. So subconsciously, like we're continuously feeling under pressure, and we're feeling that we attacked and we traumatized in some kind of way, and we have the reactions that we have and the patterns of reactions that we have developed throughout our life, yet we're not aware of that. And until we actually come to terms with the fact that actually that's not really how I want to react, that's not really, or the way I'm reacting, it's not really consciously because that's what I want to do, but it's actually like a program that's running. So we have to become aware of that we are actually just like running a program, and the basic awareness of that happening, I think, is the foundation of us actually changing it and of starting to run our own program that we consciously then inject in our behavior, and through that again we have the ability of really changing our reality as such, because that would mean if we can insert like a different way of reacting and of consciously reacting not only with ourselves but with those around us, then that's really what we can change our reality in the very instant.
That's exactly why this whole week is basically the first. Excuse me again. The first part, I extended it. It's actually going to be a 4-week course. If you take the course with me and you buy the course, it was supposed to be like this is a whole week, and then we move on to the different 3 more weeks. But since I shortened it to 2 weeks and we're doing like a condensed version, I wanted to spend a lot of time identifying. I want to give you the labels. I want to put a word to that thing that you're experiencing that you can't quite put your finger on. You don't know what it is. You just know that you feel a certain way. This might give you some language to be able to say, that's what I'm feeling. And it is the foundation to be able to stop and say, I am going through something that is feeling unbearable and I'm looking for a way to make it more bearable is really difficult because our brain is triggered into these escape plans. So whenever we feel that unbearable feeling, we just want to escape from it. But I also wanted to point out with this, there are many different ways that people react. And it's not just based on like what you've experienced or how you deal with that specific trauma. A lot of it can be biologically or traced back to biological reasons. That's the best word I can come up with. So, for example, women and men will have different go-tos for their trauma response. Women statistically, and I'm not saying all cases because we are all different and very individual, statistically, women are more likely to freeze, or they're more likely to run if they can. And if they can't, they are more likely to freeze or fawn, which means comply. And they're more likely to shut down and posture, which is freezing. I like to say posturing instead of freezing. It encompasses the symptoms a lot more. Males tend to fight and they tend to lash out. And this is why in public schools, it is set up more for women. We have more female influence for sure. And we have a lot more influence on that side. But there's a lot of women who are severely overlooked because they don't fight back. They don't act out. They just shut down and they deal with it. They posture or they try to get away from it. And that's why you see a lot of young men in schools who are acting out, and they fill the juvenile halls and the whatever they're calling it now. It was OCS, so like on campus suspensions. Most of all of my friends who were in those were all male because they won't back down. When they feel threatened, they will fight, and some of them will run, and that gets them into trouble too. But most women generally just are like, I'll keep my head down, I'll shut up, and then that makes it a little bit easier. So like trying to bridge that communication gap between like male and female, you may be experiencing, if say you get into a situation where someone goes to punch you in the face and your body reacts to freeze and you like curl up in a fetal position and protect yourself that way, a male counterpart who witnesses the situation may not understand your reaction because their reaction is to run or to fight it. They can't imagine just freezing and laying down and taking it. They don't understand what you're doing. They find that irrational behavior. So it really does break the communication between people who have experienced trauma, people who have not experienced trauma, people who don't know what trauma they've experienced, and people who are very vocal about what trauma they've experienced. And also just the different types of, I experienced trauma this way, you experienced trauma this way. I came into this at the Red Pill. The Red Pill Expo, I was talking to a gentleman who was talking about how he ran away. And I was fascinated. I was like, where did you want to go? What did you want to do? And he's like, I had no idea. I just wanted out. And I kind of like admired him for that. And I was like, I was always too scared to run away. And he looked at me and he goes, I was too scared to stay. And then he turned around. He's like, that doesn't mean that you didn't make the right choice. He was like, you did what you had to do. And that doesn't diminish, because I made a different choice, it doesn't diminish what you did and the suffering that you had to go through. And it didn't even occur to me before that would be something that some people are like, well, I reacted differently, so what was wrong with that?
I was picturing a traditional village under attack, and the natural reaction seems to be that the men grab a weapon and run to the entrance of the village to fight off the enemy, while the women would run to grab the children and go run, ensure their survival and hide somewhere or run in the bushes or whatever. So that reminds me also of the show that we did some time ago about the traditional roles of males and females in society. And I think those are also ingrained reactions that we have and that come really naturally without us even thinking about it.
So what about the people that do what I do?
Which is,
I look at the person who wants to attack me and say, you look like a really smart person. You really must be a very smart person. Only stupid people throw punches. Don't prove to me that you're stupid. I've already made up my mind that you're smart.
that's your way of fighting back.
Yeah, I guess.
Just because, I mean, women will exhibit this too, because when Dennis I was circling Dennis's face with my mouse, because for some reason I think that people can actually see who I'm referring to. Like, yes, there's going to be women who don't stop to pick up a weapon. They go grab their children, or they go like physically stand in front of them, get them away. And then there's going to be people like me, for instance. I don't have children, but you bet your ass I am not standing up in the front lines with my husband. No. I'm going to run back. I'm going to go where I'm most needed. I'm going to pick up a weapon, and I'm going to try and defend the other women who can't defend themselves. Like, I'm a second line defense in that scenario. So there are, like, that's what I was saying. Like, not all women will. I saw a lovely post that said something about kudos basically to the women who came out of trauma. And I say everyone. Like, I respect the fact that if you came out of trauma spitting fire, you go do it. If you came out feeling, meek, and you're just trying to get through your day, that's how you deal with it. Like, it doesn't matter how you come out of it. The fact that you came out of it means you have a chance.
That's cool.
With that being said, I think it'd probably be a good time to hand it back over to Mike for our journaling exercise.
I wanted to say that I want to be in front of the guys, because if my mind tricks don't work, then they can take the weapons to the enemy, and then the third line of defense would be the women. I'd want to go first and prove to them that they're smart, and they will join us.
I'm reminded
They'll have a bigger army.
I'm reminded of a
proactive approach, I think.
Huh?
It's a proactive approach. You're trying to approach the enemy before they attack.
Yeah, if my psychological shit doesn't work, then there's always a strong man right behind me, ready to take over the battle.
I am reminded of a post that a friend put up the other day about, and I can't remember where it was, and it might have even been in a fictional book. I'm not sure. That's how little I know. But the story was someone invaded these people's village and conquered it. And they said, the women bargained, if you will let us leave with whatever we can carry on our shoulders, you can have everything else. We won't fight you. We won't we will leave. And he said, fine, go ahead. Take what you can carry on your shoulders. And the women put down all of their stuff, left all of their belongings, picked their husbands up on their shoulders, and marched their asses out of the city. And he let them, because he was like, I'm a man of my word. And like, I'm always moved by that, because it's like, no, my strength is not, like, if I have to pick up a weapon, I want to know how to use it. But my strength is not physically fighting you. My strength is getting away. My strength is convincing you that you don't want to fight, or enduring what I have to until I get the chance to get away. I almost let an F-bomb slip. So you're not the only one, Agnieszka. I don't know if you saw that, where I was like,
I thought you were going to say hell. Get the hell out of there.
No, My favorite word is the F word. I love it. I was not allowed to use it as a child.
Growing
And
up in Alabama.
yeah, Louisiana. Well,
Sorry.
my mom hated the word, so my family, we took the Friends, the TV show. We took the brother and sisters communication. They'll do this or this when they want to like curse at each other. And since my mom wouldn't allow us to say the F word, we would, whenever we wanted to say it, you just see one of us behind her back going like an idiot because they knew what we were saying.
Hmm. Interesting.
So back to you, Mike.
Back to you,
All right.
Mike.
So talking about journaling, honestly, I don't know. Does anybody want to report anything in regard to their own specific journaling or?
Well, the only thing I was able to do since last week was to improve a little bit on the eulogy. That's, I guess that's not technically journaling, but and I still haven't reached to the to the final shape. I'm still like outlining. So yeah, I hope that I, by next week I should have more to report. I will have.
I had an interesting epiphany, and it shouldn't have been an epiphany because I wrote it down verbatim. So it should have just been like, oh yeah, that's true. But no, I went to write the eulogy, and I wrote these on 2 separate pages. So I had to write my journal entry, which I don't do this. I usually just use your practice as my journal entry because that's the easiest thing to do. I'm lazy. I did it. I separated it. And so I wrote my journal entry and I wrote, it's ironic that I would be writing my eulogy about my own death on the anniversary of when my first pet died. And I was like, why is that ironic? I don't even understand how that's affecting me. And I looked back on my behavior and realized that I had been posturing and kind of like numbing out or being very irritable that entire week, like the couple days before and a couple days after. And I was like, oh, okay. That makes a little bit sense. That's also part of the reason I probably haven't been writing. It's interesting to see the longer you write, even if you're only like if you get up one day and you're like, I cannot write anything, and just the idea of writing makes me pissed off. I'm not gonna write. At least I can look back and I can say, oh yeah, I do this every time. Like I'm not writing during these months every single year. It provides me a little bit of guideline to be able to see my own life, which helps with the trauma because sometimes you can't recognize patterns, especially in yourself, because it's very dangerous to point out if you are exhibiting traumatic symptoms, especially when your caretakers may be your abusers.
How about
That
you,
was it.
Agnieszka? Anything to report?
I went through my Q&A journal and filled out some answers.
Nice. Yeah, well, I wanted to talk about a little exercise I ran into, and I thought, wow, this is excellent. This might be a way that people might find journaling more interesting. And that is actually going back to different times in your life and kind of um, remembering who was there, what was going on, and who were the people that were significant, and possibly writing a little bit or even writing a message about how that person affected you, like essentially writing to that other person. What's interesting is in doing that, sometimes you'll have your subconscious mind actually responding to you kind of as that person. And it's a very interesting experience. But I think this is one of the things about journaling as you get into it more advanced. Um, you really start to see the capabilities of how tremendously powerful your mind and your spirit and body are in recollection of things and people and situations and just everything. There's just so many details that your mind picks up that you're just really not conscious of. But in reflecting on those things and maybe challenging your subconscious mind a little, you can pick up a whole bunch of information. And it's almost like re-observing that whatever that circumstance was or that experience was, and really collecting and like learning the lesson of what that situation was. And so I think this is
Oh,
really, I think, valuable for the, you know, the subject that we're talking about is how to maybe kind of approach these situations or approach the possible traumatic situations in a way that we can start to digest them, or at least be able to describe them to ourselves in a way that you know, can lead to more beneficial things in the future.
that really
Something
resonates with me. It's because I feel that's what happened. And like, although I didn't get much on paper as much as I would have wanted, I was kind of like dwelling in that, you know, in those memories, and like, oh, and I remembered this guy and that one, and oh, what happened there. So I was like, it like took me right back into those situations, and like on a, so what you're just describing, I think that happened with me, and I could totally see how that will increase and how that will improve my perception of the situation then, and give me an opportunity of reconnecting with that situation, and maybe drawing more from it. So it feels like, you know, going into overdrive in a way, because it's, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it's like, it feels like I can get more out of a situation that I would have lived through already, and kind of draw conclusions, or get lessons that, you know, maybe I physically already went through the experience, but I did not, um, um, from the perspective then, I wasn't able to collect all the lessons from it. So it's a fantastic way, because it feels like I can reconnect with situations from early on in my life, and that I can make it, I can still get the lessons, and I can get the lessons now and improve my future with that.
Absolutely.
something something that's helped me try to, like, when Mike was talking about the amount of information that we're absorbing that we don't even fully understand. One of the things that helped me when I get too frustrated and I'm like, there are symbols everywhere, there's signs everywhere, but I can't decipher them. I don't know what it is. Carl Jung's A Man and His Symbols is an excellent book for how it's a good guideline for how the mind works, and turns everything you experience into a symbol so that you can actually access, like, almost like a recording or a data file on the things that you're experiencing, to allow you to relive and go back into it, and um, you figure out all the details of it, because you can't absorb it all at once.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is another thing that you know, I think people really should. You know, a lot of people recommend meditation, but this is kind of an exercise in which you know, for those like me, I'm not a guy that really likes this, likes just the kind of like normal or you know, like what people you know, promote as meditation, where you're just sitting, you know, like Indian style, trying to do your breathing or something like that. Sometimes meditation can be a lot of different things, and certainly thinking back to a particular moment or experience is a way to meditate and really, you know, reflect is what I would call it. And you know, you should really reflect on a regular basis, you know, a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis. And by doing that, I think, you know, we really do get a great deal more out of you know, understanding of what our life is about, and you know, what our purpose is, and all that kind of good stuff. But I know we're going a little bit long on the show, and so I don't want to go, don't want to drag it out too long. We really appreciate the audience's time and attention, of course. And so you know, I do want to say that we've got some more episodes, and Wednesday's episode is going to be, you know, we're going to continue on the trauma uncovered, and this is part two. What are your default settings and how to change them? And again, Willow will be leading us through that. But remember, that is 7:30 Eastern time, Wednesday, of course, Monday and Thursday. We're here. So with all that, unless anybody's got anything else, I will say goodbye.
All right. I'm ready to go. Are you guys ready to go? Bye, everybody. Till Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. I'm playing the
See
outro
you on
now.
Wednesday.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.
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 Bye.